Hi there. Thank you so much for sticking with us here at Coffee with Stan. We've had some amazing conversations already today. I keep getting texts about progressive victory and the fact that Sam has gotten so much intensity out of average 24-year-olds who are walking around our country door knocking, and the way he's been able to efficiently do that. Our conversation with Representative Andrea Salinas, and just now wrapping up with Representative Sharice Davids. Really two amazing ladies. I'm so excited now to introduce Congressman Chris Pappas. Chris Pappas is the Democratic U.S. Rep for New Hampshire's 1st Congressional District and has served in Congress since 2019. He's a Manchester native and Harvard graduate and a small business owner as well. In Congress, when I read this and saw what he prioritizes, I thought to myself, well, I know what he works on. He works on everything, but okay, I will read the words: combating the opioid crisis, supporting veterans' rights, improving health access. Chris is an amazing guy, and I am thrilled to invite you to a conversation. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the opportunity to join you today. And I was a little jealous hearing some of my colleagues that you were talking to. I miss seeing them. And I hope when I'm back in DC in a couple of weeks that we're going to be celebrating some great victories and be back in the majority where we can make a big difference for the American people.
I believe we will be in the majority in the House, and your colleagues have given us so many interesting pieces of information on how they're really working in their districts in ways to create change that literally you can touch it. Here's the change, I can touch the change. And that has made our conversations so far today, and we'll also be talking with other of your colleagues, in particular Representative Pat Ryan and congressional candidate Laura Gillen today. I have a very, very important question to start with, and that is that I understand that your grandfather invented the chicken tender. And I would just like to know if there's a difference between the chicken tender and a chicken nugget.
There's a big difference. And actually, the New York Times did a big piece on this 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so you can go consult that. It'll give you a little bit about the anatomy of a chicken and where the term chicken tender originated from. But I've got a family restaurant business here in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm a fourth generation owner of the business, and our number one seller is our fried chicken tenders, believe it or not, and people know them all across the state. So it's sort of a local lore here that we helped pioneer fried chicken tenders decades and decades ago. But certainly, it's an interesting story to have and a neat way to connect with people out there too. As I'm campaigning, people have good memories from coming to our business.
Yeah.
They understand me as a community leader, not just necessarily a politician, which helps you build a relationship that you need, especially come election time.
Well, you certainly made a lot of the parents in my life very happy because their kids are definitely eating their chicken tenders. But jumping in, because you do so much work, and it's I thought to myself, to try to have a 22 to 23-minute conversation with you will be so hard because you are working on so many topics. And one of those topics that you're working on, and I know working really hard on, is veterans support. So, I have veterans in my family, and most of my friends and colleagues have veterans in their family. We have seen from how our family members are treated, whether it's access to the VA, and then very specifically access to health care that may affect mental health issues. These are really big topics. I know you've done a lot of work on these topics, bringing a lot of resources to New Hampshire. As I saw the number of 29, almost $30 million in state opioid response grants that you helped to bring in. Can you talk a little bit about how those funds are impacting members in your community who really need that help?
Yeah, this is a serious issue. And we recognized in my district early on, I would say 12, 15 years ago, that the opioid crisis was here, and it wasn't discriminating based on geography, socioeconomic background. It is in every one of our communities, and every family is touched by this. And so there's been a serious bipartisan effort in Congress now for several terms. I'm part of a bipartisan opioid and mental health task force that really focuses on how we can sustain our efforts around addiction and put some important ideas on the table. And the supports were really critical for my district. We've seen about a ninefold increase in the amount of federal funds coming to my district that's being invested in community supports. We really didn't have that when you look back 15, 20 years ago. And as the drugs continued to get more potent, as we saw overdose incidences skyrocketing in my state and across the country, we just didn't have the tools to be able to give people the help that they needed and to protect our communities. So, we've been partnering with state government to help build out community supports. We're working on legislation around telehealth. As you can imagine, extending the reach of providers is critically important. And, for things like recovery services, people are going to need these for the rest of their lives, once they are in recovery. And so making sure that they have access to those professionals is critically important. But just looking at the continuum of care and where the gaps are, there's still some work we've got to do. But the good news is it's happening in a bipartisan fashion in Congress. And also defending things like access to health care is critically important. Making sure that people have insurance that works for them, not only makes sure that they're going to be able to see a provider, but it also encourages more people to be providing that kind of care because the bill is going to be paid. So there are a lot of steps we have to take around medication-assisted treatment, around sober housing, and detox facilities. And we continue to really stay informed on the ground in terms of what's happening and bring that to the table in Washington.
A couple of the conversations we've been having have been in states where I think everyone recognizes, that there are areas that are extremely remote. And having grown up in Massachusetts and taken many trips to New Hampshire has a lot of extremely remote areas too. And I wonder, as you mentioned, telehealth, in what ways you've been working on getting telehealth more available so that someone who lives in a remote area can get the same level of care as if they lived in one of your larger towns or cities.
Yeah, no, it has been a game changer. And we saw during the pandemic years, the adoption of telehealth increase by providers, in part because the federal government made accommodations in the rules that allowed reimbursement for those services. And so we've been extending those on a year-by-year basis. I filed legislation to make those changes permanent, to know that telehealth is going to be a central part of how we deliver healthcare. And as you say, that's really important in a state like New Hampshire. We've got a lot of rural communities that are far away from a hospital or a community health center. And people need to know that, they can get online if it's appropriate to be able to access care. And so that's important, as I mentioned, for mental health and addiction treatment and recovery services. It's important for our seniors and our veterans. And I'll mention that VA has been really on the cutting edge of developing telehealth systems and providing those lifelines to our veterans. And so I think there's a lot the private sector can learn from how the VA has been doing this over a number of years.
It seems a really bipartisan area. Is there a pushback other than just cost in general to providing telehealth? Is it just that it's hard to get it into the budget and to become a permanent part of the budget, or are there pushback areas that we could be aware of around telehealth?
Well, I really don't think there should be pushback because I think you gain efficiencies. If someone isn't having to drive and see a provider in person, it creates more efficiencies in the system. And so I think it's just modernizing the rules. And, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services oftentimes isn't the swiftest to adopt new strategies, but this is one that I think has bipartisan support. We're going to continue to push.
Okay. I'm going to stick, if you don't mind, with veteran support. As I understand it, both your grandfathers served in World War II. My grandfather also served. And in October, a bipartisan veteran bill, the Veteran Improvement Commercial Driver License Act of 2023, was introduced by you and signed into law. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact of that and why you were such a big part of that and what it's delivering?
Well, there are a number of things that we've been focused on under the umbrella of veterans issues. And I sought assignment to that committee when I first got to Congress in 2019. And it's been an honor to do that work. And it's one of the truly bipartisan committees in Congress. I think, we've got a responsibility to take every step possible to provide the support that our veterans and their family members have earned. And so this bill is one small way we can do that. As you probably know, we have a shortage of truck drivers and folks with commercial driver's licenses right now in this country. That has impacts on our supply chains and in a host of different industries. And so the idea is that we want to make sure that veterans who have developed these skills in the military can get access to these career pipelines. There are some roadblocks in the way, and one of them is the fact that to use GI Bill benefits to access these commercial driver's license educational programs, there has to be a wait period for the program to come online. And so this does away with that time frame and closes that gap so that there are more opportunities out there for veterans to be able to move in that direction if that's a profession that they want to pursue. So it's, I think, really mirroring the idea that we should be providing every possible support for our veterans, but also that we're facing a number of workforce challenges right now. And our veterans, with the skills that they have, are just really prime examples of the kind of candidates that you want to see moving to obtain their CDL, to get into commercial trucking or whatever the industry happens to be where they can use it.
And does this law affect other industries, or was this one specific to the licensing required to be in commercial trucking?
Yeah, it's so it would allow them to get into those educational programs that allow them to obtain their CDL. And that could be used in a number of different ways, right? You could be a bus driver, you could be a union truck driver working for a company hauling freight across the country. You could be working for a local small business. So there are a lot of ways that this is helping to meet the moment. And, I hear this from my small business community, the beer distributor in my hometown, the Coca-Cola bottling plant. They are all hungry for folks that have these commercial driver's licenses. And so any step we can take to expand these programs is a positive one. And, we're able to do it to also help veterans in the process. It's a win-win.
In my previous conversations with you and in looking at some of your latest interviews, you are focused heavily on the small business world. And I think that small business owners, I know your family is a small business owner. I'm from a small business ownership family. And I think many of our friends have connections to small business, even if it's just, the barber down the street who has his business. And business is hard to keep going year after year with changes in legislation. I know that you've had a number of initiatives around how to make small business more successful locally in your district in New Hampshire. Would you give us an example of one of the areas where you've driven into a piece of success for your small business owners there?
Sure. And I think it's important to have small business voices at the table in Washington. And so I've been on the small business committee for the last 2 years, and bring to bear the lifetime of experience I have growing up in a family restaurant business, but also co-owning and managing it from my college graduation days right on up till I came to Congress. And I think when you come from that background, you're more practical in terms of how you approach issues, but you also understand the urgency that our small businesses feel day to day and the unprecedented challenges that they've been forced to navigate over the last 4 years or so. During the pandemic, there was no playbook for how you handle a global pandemic for most of our small business owners, and SBA and other agencies had to stand up new programs to provide them the support that they needed. But now as they recover, there are some unique challenges out there, and they include workforce access to capital, and making sure that we're lowering costs. Things like energy costs continue to be incredibly high for small businesses in my part of the country. And so I think we just have to be sensible about how we work to meet their needs. So I've introduced a variety of bills that try to respond to some of these topics. I think, our small businesses are job creators. 99% of our employers in my state and pretty much across the country are true small businesses, are Main Street businesses, and they all have unique needs. And so I think it's important to hear them out and take their stories with us to Washington to help shape the work.
100%. You're, as I know, you're the first openly gay man to represent New Hampshire in Congress. Certainly that part of our conversation nationally has gotten a little loud as we both sit here, and
Hmm.
as a pragmatic human being, right? Someone who simply believes that we're all equal, and so let's move on with it and support each other. I know that you've actually taken some pretty strong bipartisan stands in Congress to be sure that LGBTQ plus rights are maintained and not taken away. I'd love to
Yep.
hear your thoughts on the current state of that and anything you're looking at specifically that you'd like to highlight with us.
Well, it is an important moment. We see increasing political attacks on the LGBTQ community across the country, in state legislators, in local governing boards, in Congress. And even over the last 2 years, we've seen the majority in Congress use must pass bills like the defense bill as an opportunity to push an anti LGBTQ agenda. And I think it's just really discouraging that we're not further along in terms of making sure that all Americans are equal and that we're just respecting how people live their lives. And so we've got a lot more work to do, I think, to get to the place where Congress reflects how people are living their lives across the country and the fact that there's broad bipartisan support for issues around equality. And you look at a bill like the Equality Act, which we have been pushing for several terms now, haven't yet gotten it through the Senate to the president's desk, but we have hope that after the election, we'll have the support we need. And this would just add LGBTQ plus to our nation's civil rights statutes in terms of preventing discrimination. And there's nothing more American than a concept of treating everyone equally before the law. And I think that's what everyone deserves. So I think it's important to make sure that our community is reflected and represented in the halls of Congress. Next year we will likely have our first transgender member of Congress. We will likely have more LGBTQ members than at any point in our nation's history. And I think that representation is critically important to make sure that we're helping to educate our colleagues about the community and about making sure that we're receiving the same sort of protections under the law that every other American receives.
100%. One of the things that struck me in our conversations today have been these moments where our member of Congress will say, I'm working with this person who I don't agree with at all on almost anything, but we're working together on this. And those stories, I think, mean so much. Can you give us an example of one of the things that you're working on where you're working with and across the aisle to get something done that has nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with how we're different,
Sure.
only to do with how we're
No,
the same?
you're right. And it's so important to highlight that because too often we see the conflict. We see the people who are on the extremes, who are there for clicks and for notoriety, but aren't there to actually legislate. And so that can be incredibly frustrating because there actually is substantive bipartisan work happening. A number of the bills that I mentioned were done through partnership with members across the aisle. I think of the subcommittee I sit on the Veterans Affairs Committee. It's the Disability Assistance Subcommittee. And so I'm the ranking member. There's a Republican chair. His name's Morgan Luttrell. He's from Texas, quite conservative in most of his views. But we work hand in glove with respect to issues that come before our committee. We passed a law to give veterans a cost of living adjustment who are on disability benefits. So those are the kinds of common sense things that can happen when you try to push the noise to the side and focus on solutions instead. And so I do think there are a lot of areas that are ripe for that kind of collaboration, whether it's addiction and mental health, veterans, small business. Those are areas that we absolutely should continue to find partners and work together. And just think of some of the big pieces of bipartisan legislation just a couple years ago that we were able to get through, from the PACT Act, which is helping veterans exposed to toxic substances, to the infrastructure law, to the Chips and Science Act. These are signature bills that brought Republicans and Democrats together. So we can continue to do that work. We just need to help build the conditions to ensure that more of it can get done successfully, and also the relationships that really underpin any successful effort to work across the aisle.
Well, and it's those relationships then that will allow you to breach those divides when it comes time to talk about something that you do disagree with. Well, Congressman Pappas, you are someone who I look up to a lot. I respect the work that you are doing and very much appreciate that you took the time. I hope that everyone who's with us right now will click through, because politics, unfortunately, in our world does take some resources. So donations, of course, are important. The opportunity to volunteer with your campaign, whether it's phone banking, door knocking, or any other kind of resource, or simply sharing our conversation digitally to amplify the conversation. I again just want to say thank you for being one of the calm, open, trusting, and positive voices in our Congress today. Please keep up the amazing work, and thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Oh, thanks. It was my pleasure. And politics doesn't have to be all negativity. We can have hope and optimism for the future. And I hope that's what this election process will be about, bringing people together to get things done for the American people and move our country forward. And just really grateful for your time today. And thanks for all the support.
Well, thank you so much. We're about to dive into a congressional candidate, Laura Gillen, who will be with us in just about 5 minutes. So for those of you sticking with us live, I heard from a friend of mine at work that people have this in their corner of their screen. They're watching this. Don't tell that to anyone at work. So thank you so much again, Chris Pappas, for joining us. And we will see you all in just a couple of minutes with congressional candidate Laura Gillen.
All the best.
Bye.